I found out the HOA was using my heated workshop for their monthly craft projects when I came home early from a business trip in Milwaukee and heard a group of women cackling in my detached garage. My name is Ethan Zimmerman, and I had been living peacefully in this planned community in Aurora, Colorado, for 3 years before everything went sideways. The sound coming from my property made me freeze in my driveway. I recognized that particular pitch of laughter, the kind that comes from middle-aged women who have had too much wine during the day. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. What the hell was going on? I walked around the side of my house, past the perfectly manicured bushes that the HOA insisted everyone maintain, and approached the workshop I had built 2 years ago. Well, not exactly built from scratch. The structure was already there when I bought the place, but I had invested over $30,000 renovating it into a heated, insulated workspace where I could work on my furniture restoration projects. I had installed radiant floor heating, proper ventilation, industrial lighting, and even a small kitchenette area. The door was propped open despite the February cold, and I could see at least 6 women inside, sitting around my workbench with what looked like glitter, construction paper, and foam boards scattered everywhere. My expensive tools had been pushed to the side, some of them on the floor. My blood pressure spiked immediately. I stepped inside, and the conversation stopped like someone had hit a mute button. "Can I help you ladies?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite wanting to shout. A woman I recognized as Deborah Patterson, the HOA president, stood up from my custom leather stool. She was wearing a purple velvet tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and her blonde hair was teased into that particular Karen style that screams entitlement. "Oh, Ethan, we thought you were gone until Saturday," she said, not a trace of apology in her voice. "We are just having our monthly HOA craft meeting." "In my workshop," I said, "without my permission." Another woman, Sandra Jenkins, the HOA vice president, waved her hand dismissively. She had the same entitled energy as Deborah, complete with designer sunglasses pushed up on her head despite being indoors. "Your wife said it was fine." That made me pause. My wife? "Yes. Natalie mentioned at the last community meeting that you had this wonderful heated space, and we have been freezing in the community center," Deborah explained, as if this made perfect sense. "The heating system there broke down in November, and it has been absolute misery trying to work on our projects in the cold." I took a deep breath, trying to process what I was hearing. First of all, Natalie was my ex-wife, and we had divorced 8 months ago. She had moved out and was now living in Denver with her new boyfriend. Second, even if she had mentioned my workshop, she had absolutely no authority to give anyone permission to use it. "Natalie does not live here anymore," I said slowly. "We got divorced last summer. And regardless, she never had the right to offer up my private property for HOA use." The women exchanged glances. Deborah's expression shifted from friendly to defensive in an instant. "Well, we have been using it for 3 months now, every Thursday. If there was going to be an issue, you should have said something sooner." I felt my jaw clench. "I did not say anything because I did not know about it. I travel for work. How did you even get in here?" A younger woman in the back, someone I did not recognize, held up a key. "It was in the HOA office key box." The key box. That damned key box that Natalie had insisted we contribute to in case of emergencies. She had said it was for snow removal services, or if something happened and someone needed to access our property. I had never imagined it would be used like this. "That key was for emergencies, not for unauthorized social gatherings," I said, holding out my hand. "Give it here." The younger woman looked at Deborah, who nodded curtly. She brought the key over and dropped it into my palm. "I am going to need all of you to leave now," I said. "And take your craft supplies with you." "We are not finished," Sandra protested. "We are making decorations for the spring community picnic. We have another hour of work." "You can finish somewhere else. This is private property and you are trespassing." Deborah's face flushed red. "Trespassing? Do not be ridiculous. We are the HOA board. We are working on community projects that benefit everyone, including you. I do not care if you are making decorations for the Pope. This is my workshop. I did not give you permission to be here and I want you out. Now." The temperature in the room seemed to drop, despite the heating system running full blast. The women started gathering their supplies with aggressive movements, making it clear through their body language that they thought I was being unreasonable. "This is incredibly selfish," Deborah said as she swept foam cutouts into a plastic bin. "The community center is absolutely frigid. We have been asking the management company to fix the heating for months, but they keep putting it off. Your workshop was a perfect solution." "Then rent a space somewhere or meet in someone's house," I said. "You do not get to commandeer my property without asking." "Fine," Deborah snapped. She turned to the other women. "Ladies, let us go. Apparently, Mr. Zimmerman does not understand what it means to be part of a community." They filed out, giving me dirty looks as they passed. Sandra was the last to leave and she stopped in the doorway. "You know, Ethan, this attitude is going to be remembered. The HOA board has a long memory." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a fact," she said, and then she was gone. I stood in my workshop, looking at the mess they had left behind. There was glitter embedded in my workbench, sticky adhesive residue on my table saw, and someone had spilled what looked like paint on the floor near my equipment cabinet. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning, getting angrier with each minute that passed. That night, I changed the locks on the workshop and installed a security camera system. I should have done it sooner, but I had trusted that my property would remain my property. Clearly, that had been naive. The next morning, I received an email from Deborah. The subject line was "Community Violation Notice." I opened it with a sense of dread. "Dear Mr. Zimmerman, it has come to our attention that you have installed security cameras on your property without HOA approval. Per Article 7, Section 3 of the Community Bylaws, all exterior modifications must be submitted to the Architectural Review Committee for approval before installation. You have 5 business days to submit the proper paperwork or remove the cameras. Additionally, the board has received complaints about your confrontational behavior toward community volunteers. We will be discussing this matter at the next board meeting." I read it 3 times, each time getting more incredulous. They had been using my property without permission for 3 months, but I was the one getting a violation notice. I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws, that thick binder of rules that I had skimmed when I first moved in, but never read thoroughly. I spent the entire Saturday going through it page by page. The section about exterior modifications did exist, but there was an exemption for security equipment. Deborah was either lying or had not read her own rules. I fired off a response, citing the relevant section and asking for a written explanation of how the HOA had obtained access to my workshop without my consent. I kept it professional, but I made it clear I was not going to roll over. Monday morning, I got a call from Janet Morrison, the property manager who worked for the management company that handled our community. She sounded tired. "Ethan, I got a call from Deborah about your workshop situation," she said. "Can you tell me what happened?" I explained everything, from coming home early to the key that should not have been used. Janet sighed heavily. "I did not know they were doing that," she said. That key box is supposed to be for maintenance only. I am going to have a conversation with the board about proper procedures. I want it in writing that they do not have permission to access my property, I said. And I want to know how Natalie's key ended up in that box in the first place. I will look into it, Janet promised. In the meantime, I would recommend attending the next board meeting. It is next Thursday evening. The week passed slowly. I threw myself into work, trying not to think about the situation, but it gnawed at me. On Wednesday, I received another email, this time from Sandra. The HOA was implementing new parking restrictions, and my work van would no longer be allowed to park in my own driveway overnight because it was considered a commercial vehicle. It had to be parked in the designated commercial vehicle area at the far end of the community. This was clearly retaliation. My van had been parked in my driveway for 3 years without issue. I had even checked the bylaws when I first moved in to make sure it was allowed. I showed up to the Thursday board meeting ready for a fight. The meeting was held in the community center, which was indeed freezing cold. I could see my breath in the air. About 15 other homeowners were there, all bundled up in coats and scarves. Deborah called the meeting to order from behind a folding table at the front of the room. Sandra sat next to her, along with 3 other board members I vaguely recognized. The treasurer was a man named Richard Kowalski, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The secretary was a woman named Patricia Wells, who was busy typing on her laptop. The final board member was Marcus Chen, who handled architectural reviews. "First order of business," Deborah said, looking directly at me. "We need to address the issue of community cooperation and the use of private resources for public benefit." Here we go, I thought. As everyone knows, our community center heating has been broken for several months, she continued. We have been trying to find temporary solutions for our various community activities. One of our members generously offered the use of a heated workshop space, which the board accepted. Unfortunately, this member has now withdrawn that offer, leaving us without a warm place to meet. "That is a complete misrepresentation," I said, standing up. "My ex-wife, who no longer lives here, mentioned my workshop. She did not offer it, and she had no authority to do so." The HOA then used a key that was supposed to be for emergencies only and accessed my private property without permission for 3 months. That is called trespassing. Several homeowners turned to look at me with interest. Deborah's face tightened. "That is your interpretation." The board believed we had permission based on information from a community member. "From someone who does not live here and does not own the property," I said. "You never once called me, emailed me, or left a note asking if you could use my workshop. You just took it." "This is getting off track," Sandra interjected. "The point is, we need solutions, not accusations." "The solution is simple," I said. "Fix the heating in the community center like you are supposed to. That is what our HOA fees pay for." Richard, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "Actually, Ethan raises a good point. We have the funds to repair the heating system. I have been saying this for months." Deborah shot him a look that could have melted steel. "The heating repair quote came in much higher than expected. We are trying to negotiate a better price." "How long does that take?" another homeowner called out. "It has been 4 months." The meeting devolved into a debate about the heating system, and I thought maybe the focus would shift away from me. But at the end of the meeting, during new business, Deborah brought up the parking restriction. "Due to increased concerns about community aesthetics, we are implementing a new rule regarding commercial vehicles," she announced. "Effective immediately, commercial vehicles may not be parked in residential driveways overnight." "That is not a new rule," I said. "That is a made-up rule designed to target me specifically." "It applies to everyone," Sandra said sweetly. How many people in this community have commercial vehicles? I asked. I know for a fact that there are at least 5 other people with work trucks or vans. Are you enforcing this across the board? We will be, Deborah said. Then I want to see it in writing, and I want to see consistent enforcement, I said, because this sounds like harassment. Patricia, the secretary, spoke up for the first time. Actually, Deborah, we cannot just implement new parking rules without a community vote. That is in the bylaws. Deborah looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Fine. We will put it to a vote at the next monthly meeting. I left the meeting feeling frustrated but slightly vindicated. At least some of the board members seemed to understand that Deborah was overstepping. But I had a sinking feeling this was far from over. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. I received a violation notice for leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. Then another notice for having a small patch of dead grass in my yard. Then another for not having the correct shade of white paint on my fence, even though the fence had been that color since I moved in. I documented everything and responded to each notice with photos, timestamps, and references to the relevant bylaws. It was exhausting. Then I received a certified letter. The HOA was fining me $500 for hostile behavior toward board members and community volunteers. The letter cited my aggressive removal of the craft group from my workshop. That was it. That was the line. I called a lawyer, a guy named Tom Bradford who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Denver, and I drove in to meet with him on a Friday afternoon. Tom was in his early 50s, with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to my story, looking at all the documentation I had brought. "This is pretty clear-cut harassment," he said. "You have a good case. The question is, how far do you want to take this?" "I want them to leave me alone," I said, "and I want them to stop abusing their authority." "That might require going nuclear," Tom warned. "If we push back hard, they will push back harder. HOA disputes can get ugly." "It is already ugly," I said. "What are my options?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "First, we send them a cease and desist letter. We outline all the violations of proper procedure, the harassment, and the trespassing. We demand they rescind the fines and stop targeting you. If they do not comply, we can file a lawsuit for harassment and seek damages. We can also report the trespassing to the police." "Will that work?" I asked. "It might. Some HOAs back down when they realize they are legally exposed. Others double down. It depends on how stubborn your board president is." Based on what I had seen of Deborah, I was betting on stubborn. Tom drafted the cease and desist letter, and we sent it via certified mail and email. In it, he outlined every single thing the HOA had done wrong, from the unauthorized use of my property to the retaliatory fines. He demanded a written apology, rescission of all fines, and a commitment to follow proper procedures going forward. The response came 3 days later. It was not from Deborah, but from a lawyer representing the HOA, a woman named Catherine Mills. Her letter was condescending and dismissive. She claimed the HOA had acted within its rights, that I was being overly litigious, and that the board would not be intimidated by legal threats. "Well," Tom said when I forwarded him the email, "I guess we are going to court." He filed a lawsuit in Arapahoe County Court seeking damages for harassment, trespassing, and violation of my property rights. The filing made the local news. Apparently, HOA disputes were a hot topic, and a reporter from a Denver news station reached out to interview me. I agreed, figuring public pressure might help. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. I explained the situation calmly, showing the reporter my workshop and the security camera footage of the craft group using it without permission. The reporter also interviewed Deborah, who painted herself as the victim of an uncooperative homeowner. "We are just trying to serve the community," she said on camera, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It is unfortunate that some people do not want to be team players." The segment sparked a debate on social media. Some people sided with me, saying the HOA had overstepped. Others thought I was being petty and should have just let them use the workshop. The attention put pressure on the HOA board, though. Several homeowners in the community started asking questions about the heating system and why it still was not fixed. In late March, the case went to mediation. Tom and I sat in a conference room with Deborah, Sandra, and Catherine Mills, the HOA's lawyer. A mediator, a calm woman named Lisa Fernandez, tried to find common ground. "Let us start with the core issue," Lisa said. "Mr. Zimmerman, the HOA used your workshop without explicit permission. That is the root of this conflict." "Correct, I said. "And they continue to harass me with frivolous fines and violations." "We are enforcing community standards," Deborah said. "Standards that Mr. Zimmerman agreed to when he moved here." "Selectively," Tom interjected. "My client has documented at least 8 other properties with similar or worse violations that have received no notices. This is targeted harassment." Catherine leaned forward. "The board has discretion in enforcement. That is clearly stated in the bylaws." "Discretion is not the same as discrimination," Tom countered. The mediation went in circles for 2 hours. Finally, Lisa proposed a compromise. The HOA would rescind all fines and agree to stop issuing violations for 6 months unless there was a significant breach of community standards. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit. "What about the trespassing?" I asked. "Do they admit they were wrong? The board is willing to acknowledge there was a miscommunication about property access," Catherine said carefully. "That is not an admission," I said. "It is as close as you are going to get," Lisa said. I looked at Tom. He shrugged. "It is your call. We can keep fighting, but it will cost more time and money, and the outcome is uncertain." I thought about it. I was tired. The constant battle was wearing me down. But I also did not want Deborah to think she had won. "I will agree to the mediation terms with one addition," I said. "The HOA has to fix the heating in the community center within 60 days. If they are going to claim they need warm spaces for community activities, they need to use the space they actually have control over." Deborah bristled. "That is not part of this dispute." "Actually, it is," I said. "Your excuse for using my workshop was that the community center was too cold." "Prove you actually care about that by fixing it." Lisa looked at Catherine. "That seems reasonable. It is a separate issue but related." Catherine conferred quietly with Deborah and Sandra. Finally, Deborah nodded stiffly. "Fine. We will prioritize the heating repair." We signed the mediation agreement that day. I felt a mix of relief and dissatisfaction. I had not gotten the full acknowledgement I wanted, but at least the harassment would stop. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Then, in mid-April, I noticed something strange. My power bills had skyrocketed. I am talking about double what I normally paid. I checked my usage on the utility company's website and saw that my consumption had spiked dramatically starting in November and only dropped back to normal in February. November. That was when the HOA had started using my workshop. I pulled up the security camera footage I had saved and reviewed it carefully. The HOA craft group had met every Thursday, but I noticed something I had not paid attention to before. Several of the women had keys. They were coming and going at other times too. I installed additional cameras inside the workshop and checked the footage daily. Sure enough, on a Monday afternoon, Sandra let herself in with a key I had not retrieved. She worked on what looked like a sewing project for about an hour, using my electricity and heat the entire time. I was furious. I had changed the locks, so how did she have a key? I reviewed my security footage from the day I changed the locks. There, clear as day, was Sandra watching from her car down the street. She had seen the locksmith, and she must have had a copy made. I called Tom immediately. "They are still accessing your property," he said, sounding incredulous. "Yes, and they have been using my electricity for months. I did not realize it until I saw the bill increase." "That is theft of services," Tom said. "That is a crime. You need to call the police." I hesitated. Calling the police felt like an escalation I was not sure I wanted, but Tom was insistent. "Ethan, they are stealing from you. This is not an HOA dispute anymore. This is criminal." He was right. I called the Aurora Police Department and filed a report. An officer came out that evening, a young guy named Officer Davis. I showed him the security footage, the bills, and the mediation agreement. "This is pretty clear," he said. "Do you know who has been accessing the property?" "Sandra Jenkins," I said. "She is the HOA vice president." Officer Davis took notes and said he would follow up. 2 days later, he called to tell me that Sandra had been cited for criminal trespass and theft of services. She would have to appear in court. The news spread through the community like wildfire. People were shocked that an HOA board member had been charged with a crime. Sandra sent me a furious email calling me vindictive and petty. I did not respond. The HOA held an emergency meeting. Deborah tried to defend Sandra, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but several homeowners demanded her resignation. The pressure was too much. Sandra stepped down from the board the next week. With Sandra gone, Deborah became even more isolated. Richard, the treasurer, started asking pointed questions about finances and how decisions were being made. Other homeowners joined in. It turned out that the heating system repair had been delayed not because of cost negotiations, but because Deborah had been funneling funds to other projects, including expensive landscaping around her own property that she had classified as community beautification. The community exploded. An audit was demanded. The management company launched an investigation. Within a month, it was revealed that Deborah had misappropriated over $15,000 in HOA funds. She was removed from the board and faced embezzlement charges. The management company hired a forensic accountant to trace all the spending, and the case was turned over to the district attorney's office. I watched all of this unfold with a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. What had started as me kicking a craft group out of my workshop had spiraled into a full-blown financial scandal. In June, a special election was held to replace the entire board. New members were voted in, people who actually seemed interested in serving the community rather than wielding power. The heating system in the community center was finally repaired. My power bills went back to normal. Sandra's court date came up in July. I had to testify about the trespassing and the theft of services. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to probation and ordered to pay restitution for the electricity she had used. The judge was not sympathetic. "You held a position of trust in your community," he said, "and you abused it. This behavior is unacceptable." Deborah's case took longer. She tried to fight the charges, claiming the spending had been authorized, but the paper trail did not support her story. In September, she pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 18 months in jail, with the possibility of parole after 9 months. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. I ran into Richard one day at the grocery store. He looked exhausted but relieved. "I owe you an apology," he said. I should have pushed back harder against Deborah and Sandra. I knew something was off, but I did not want to rock the boat. "It is not your fault," I said. "They were good at hiding what they were doing. Still," he said, "if you had not stood your ground, who knows how long it would have gone on." The new board reached out to me in October. They wanted to make amends for everything that had happened. They offered to reimburse me for the legal fees and the electricity costs. I was surprised but accepted. "We want to rebuild trust," the new president, a woman named Rachel Ortiz, told me. "What happened was unacceptable, and we are committed to making sure it never happens again." I appreciated the gesture. It felt like the community was finally moving in a positive direction. As winter approached again, I spent more time in my workshop. It was mine again, truly mine. No unwanted visitors, no unauthorized craft projects, just me and my furniture restoration work. One cold evening in early December, I was sanding down an antique dresser when I heard a knock on the workshop door. I tensed, half expecting trouble, but when I opened the door, it was Rachel. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I just wanted to let you know that we finally got the heating in the community center upgraded. It is better than it ever was. The craft group has been meeting there for the past 2 months and they love it." "That is great," I said. "They also asked me to give you this," Rachel said, handing me an envelope. "It is an apology letter. They feel terrible about what happened." I opened the envelope and read the letter. It was signed by all the women who had been in my workshop that day, expressing regret for not questioning whether they really had permission. It was not a full absolution, but it was something. "Thanks," I said. "I appreciate it." Rachel smiled. "You know, they are working on decorations for the winter holiday party. If you want to stop by and see what they are making, you are welcome. No pressure." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to stay bitter to hold onto the anger, but another part of me was tired of fighting. "Maybe," I said. "I will think about it." She nodded and left. I went back to my dresser, running the sandpaper over the wood in smooth, even strokes. The workshop was warm, heated by the system I had paid for and controlled. It was mine. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I walked over to the community center one Thursday evening. Inside, the craft group was hard at work, surrounded by tinsel and ornaments. They looked up when I entered, and there was a moment of awkward silence. Then one of the women, the younger one who had held up the key that day, stood up. "Ethan, right? I am Kelly. I just wanted to say again how sorry I am. I should have asked more questions." "It is okay," I said. "It is over now." The other women murmured agreements. The atmosphere was tentative but not hostile. I stayed for a few minutes, looking at the decorations they were making. They were actually pretty good. "You all are welcome to the community center now," I said. "I hope the heating is working out." "It is amazing," one of the women said. "We were not sure it would ever get fixed." "Well, it did," I said. "Enjoy it." I left feeling lighter than I had in months. The battle was over. The HOA had faced consequences for their actions. The community was healing. Christmas came and went. The holiday party was a success, and I even attended for a little while. People were friendly, and no one brought up the drama. It was like everyone had decided to move on. In January, I got a letter from the court. Deborah had been released on parole after serving 10 months. She had moved out of the community, unable to face the people she had betrayed. Sandra had completed her probation and had also moved, relocating to Colorado Springs to start over. I did not feel triumphant about their downfall. Mostly, I just felt relieved that it was behind me. One Saturday morning in late January, I was in my workshop when my phone rang. It was Tom, my lawyer. "Hey, Ethan," he said. "I just wanted to check in. How are things?" "Good," I said. "Quiet, finally." "Glad to hear it," Tom said. You know, your case was pretty unique. I have been practicing for 20 years and I have never seen an HOA situation spiral like that. Yeah, it was something, I agreed. Well, if you ever need anything, let me know, and hey, stay out of trouble. I will do my best, I said, laughing. After we hung up, I looked around my workshop. It was exactly as it should be. My tools were organized, my projects were laid out, and the heat was set to a comfortable 70 degrees. It was mine, no one else's. I went back to work on a chair I was rooflstering, losing myself in the rhythm of the task. Outside, snow started to fall, blanketing the community in white. Inside my workshop, I was warm, and that was all I had ever wanted, to be left alone to work in peace in the space I had created. It had taken a fight, a lawsuit, and a full-blown scandal to get there, but I had won. Not just against the HOA, but for my right to control my own property. As I worked, I thought about Deborah and Sandra. I imagined them now, wherever they were, probably dealing with the consequences of their actions. Deborah, fresh out of jail, trying to rebuild her life. Sandra, starting over in a new city, her reputation in tatters. And I thought about the craft group, now meeting in the community center. Without access to my heated workshop, they had suffered through weeks of cold before the repairs were finally completed. During that time, according to Rachel, they had tried meeting in the unheated community center, bundled up in coats and gloves, their fingers too cold to do delicate work. Some had suggested meeting in people's homes, but no one wanted to host. The group had nearly disbanded. It was only when the new board pushed through the heating repairs, driven partly by the spotlight I had shone on the issue, that the craft group had been revived. They were grateful now, Rachel had told me, for the proper space. But they had learned a hard lesson about respecting boundaries and asking permission. The whole situation had been a mess, but it had also exposed deeper problems in the community. The financial mismanagement, the abuse of power, the lack of accountability. My refusal to let the HOA walk all over me had been the catalyst for change. I finished the chair rooflstery around dinner time and stepped back to admire my work. It was a Victorian piece, over 100 years old, and I had brought it back to life. There was something deeply satisfying about restoration work, about taking something broken and making it whole again. Maybe that was what the community was going through too. A restoration. A chance to rebuild trust and create something better. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Board meeting next week. Hope you can make it. We are voting on new transparency policies. I replied that I would be there. For the first time in a long time, I actually wanted to be involved. The meeting was well attended. The new board had made an effort to keep everyone informed, sending out detailed agendas and financial reports. There was none of the secrecy and manipulation that had characterized Deborah's reign. Rachel opened the meeting by presenting the proposed transparency policies. All board decisions would be documented and available for homeowner review. Financial reports would be published monthly. Any spending over a certain threshold would require homeowner approval. It was exactly what the community needed. The vote was unanimous. People applauded. It felt like a turning point. After the meeting, I walked back to my house with a sense of peace. The battle had been exhausting, but it had been worth it. I had stood up for myself, and in doing so, I had helped the community become better. As February rolled around again, marking a year since the whole thing had started, I reflected on everything that had happened. The shock of finding strangers in my workshop, the anger and frustration of being targeted by the HOA, the stress of legal battles and court appearances, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. It had been a wild ride, but I had come out the other side stronger and more confident in my ability to stand up for what was right. One evening, I was in my workshop, working on a new project when I heard voices outside. I looked out the window and saw a group of kids building a snowman in the community park. Their laughter echoed in the cold air. It reminded me of what communities were supposed to be about. Neighbors supporting each other, kids playing, people coming together for shared experiences. Not power struggles and petty grievances. I turned back to my work, grateful for the warmth of my workshop and the peace of mind that came with knowing my boundaries would be respected. The story could have ended differently. If I had not come home early that day, the HOA might have continued using my workshop indefinitely. The financial mismanagement might have gone undetected. Deborah and Sandra might still be in power, bullying homeowners and abusing their authority, but I had come home. I had seen what was happening. And I had refused to back down. Sometimes standing up for yourself has ripple effects you cannot predict. In my case, it had exposed corruption, brought accountability to the HOA, and ultimately made the community a better place to live. As spring approached, the community seemed lighter somehow. The new board was doing a good job. People were more engaged and informed. There was a sense of optimism that had been missing before. I continued my furniture restoration work, taking on clients from all over Colorado. My reputation grew, and I found myself busier than ever. The workshop, my sanctuary, hummed with activity. One Saturday in March, I was finishing up a project when there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Kelly, the young woman from the craft group. "Hi, Ethan," she said nervously. "I hope I am not bothering you." "Not at all," I said. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to ask you something," she said. "I am getting married in June and I need someone to restore some furniture for the reception. Vintage pieces. I saw your work and it is incredible. Would you be interested?" I smiled. "I would be honored. Let us talk details." We spent the next hour discussing her vision for the wedding. She was excited and genuine, and it was clear she had learned from the mistakes of the past. As she left, she paused. "Thank you, Ethan. Not just for this, but for everything. What you did, standing up to the old board, it made a real difference." "You are welcome," I said. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" she asked. "Always ask permission before using someone else's property." She laughed. "Trust me, I learned that lesson." The wedding furniture project kept me busy through the spring. I poured myself into the work, creating pieces that Kelly loved. The wedding was beautiful, and seeing my restorations as part of her special day was incredibly rewarding. As summer approached, I took stock of my life. The past year had been tumultuous, but I had come through it okay. Better than okay, actually. I had learned to stand up for myself, to navigate legal systems, to fight for what was right. The community had changed too. The new HOA board was functional and fair. The craft group thrived in the community center. Financial transparency had restored trust. People were happier, and me. I was content. I had my workshop, my work, my peace of mind. The HOA drama was behind me, a chapter closed. One warm evening in July, I sat outside my workshop enjoying the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The air was still and peaceful. Rachel walked by and waved. "Beautiful evening," she called out. "Sure is," I agreed. She came over and leaned against the fence. "You know, I have been thinking. We should do a community appreciation event. Recognize people who have made a difference. I would like to include you." I shook my head. "I do not need recognition. I just wanted to be left alone." "I know," she said, "but what you did mattered. You held people accountable. You helped us become a better community." "I was just protecting my property," I said. "Maybe," Rachel said. "But the result was bigger than that. Think about it." "Okay." She left, and I sat there thinking, maybe she was right. Maybe my fight had been about more than just my workshop. Maybe it had been about standing up to bullies, about demanding accountability, about refusing to let people abuse power. In the end, I declined the recognition. I did not need a plaque or a speech. What I had was enough. My workshop warm and secure. My work fulfilling and creative. My peace, hard-won but lasting. As the seasons turned and another winter approached, I thought about Deborah and Sandra occasionally. I wondered if they had learned anything, if they regretted their actions, if they were trying to be better people. I hoped they were. Not for my sake, but for theirs. The community continued to thrive. New families moved in. The HOA operated smoothly under the new board. The craft group expanded, adding new members and new projects. And me, I kept working in my heated workshop, surrounded by tools and wood and the satisfaction of creation. The space was mine as it always should have been. The fight was over. The eviction of the HOA from my workshop, their forced return to freezing temps, had been just the beginning. But in the end, justice had been served. The guilty had faced consequences. The community had healed, and I had won. Not through aggression or revenge, but through persistence, documentation, and a refusal to be bullied. It was enough. More than enough. As I locked up the workshop one final time that year, I looked around with satisfaction. The heating hummed quietly, keeping the space at a perfect temperature. My tools gleamed in their places. Projects in various stages of completion lined the walls. This was my space. My sanctuary, my workshop, and no one would take it from me again.